Hello, welcome my friend. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Dr. Karen Carr, and I'm glad that you've joined us for our second lesson in the book of Psalms. And we're off to a great start, and we're excited about what's ahead for us. And again, we're just so thankful that you've joined us today, and we're looking forward to opening the Word of God and diving into some of the interesting nuggets found in the book of Psalms. Well, as we look at lesson 2, in our study in the book of Psalms, we are going to be beginning to talk about the superscriptions that are found in the book of Psalms. Sometimes they're referred to as the title of the psalm, for maybe a more familiar term. Superscriptions sometimes is known as something that comes before. Subscriptions is things that come below something. And there's discussion and debate on whether or not the things that we determine to be superscriptions were originally put as subscriptions. And the designation of the Psalms themselves was something that was done after the Psalms were compiled together. And really, even the workers and the translators of the Septuagint helped with this process. It just helped to kind of like later those that helped translate the Bible and put the whole composition really of the Bible together to where there were chapters and verses. Some of that was done, at later dates as far as designating this is Psalms 119, or this is Psalm 1, or this is Psalm 23, and also with the superscriptions and the titles. They appear above the first verse of approximately 116 of the Psalms. And there's various bits of information that about each individual psalm. Some superscriptions mention the author of the psalm. Not all the psalms were written by David. Some definitely were. Approximately about 73 of them were written by David, and others were written by other contributors. And they were not a part of the original. Most scholars believe that, but they were added later. So the information that they provide about the people and the events contributes significantly to determining authorship to the extent that we can. It also provides information about times, events, different seasons, particularly in David's life. So we'll identify this later in the course as we're studying the Psalms, particularly to David. It offers a lot of historical content that helps us better understand the content of, again, each individual psalm. So there's musical information provided. Many of the superscriptions contains instructions. One of those is the phrase, to the chief musician. This is actually one word in the Hebrew, but it's what it means. And it's, when I think of what to the chief musician means to me now, I get the feeling it's almost like to the song leader, to the worship leader, to the person who's going to lead the song service. Certain information for a planning purpose. There were 55 of the Psalms contained the phrase to the chief musician. And we have a list of these Psalms, and I will, for those of you who don't have a workbook, who are listening to the lessons without the benefit of having the workbook, I will list the Psalms that contain the phrase to the chief musician. And it's a long list of them because there's 55 of them. And those Psalms that contain the phrase to the chief musician contain additional information points about people, again, David, whether it's a Psalm of David, if it was to Jeduthun, musical instruments concerning the tempo, the tune, or other technical issues. There's different information that's given that describes which type of musical instruments that this is played on. Maybe perhaps one of the psalms was to the chief musician, and they're reminded that this is played on a harp, or this is played with a stringed instrument, or this is played on some other type of instrument, whether it was a 5-string, 10-string musical instrument, or whether it was harp, or whether it was a cappella, or just sang with voices. The definitions, they're presented in as much information as we can provide as far as what's translated for us today that we can understand. Some things have been lost in translation and in time. But so some are about lyrics. A miktam might mean that this is a poem, this is a mystery, this is a song. It has very deep significance, and they're recorded as miktams of David. There are mashils. This actually means a didactic poem, or something that's used to teach or to instruct us a special kind of musical preference. Paul mentioned in the book of Colossians and Ephesians to teach one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. There definitely were instruction psalms, if you will, mashils, that they're associated with David. They're associated with the sons of Korah, with Asaph, with Herman the Ezrahite, and Ethan the Ezrahite. Some songs were given that they were that this is specifically, this is a song or a psalm, and it would designate whether it was a song for the sons of Korah, or a song of David, or a song of Asaph, a song that was designated specifically for the Sabbath day. There were songs of loves. There were songs upon Mammoth. So that's Psalm 46. There are 15 known psalms that were known as Psalms of Degrees, which interpreted is a journey to a higher place, if you will. There's 15 psalms specifically that were known as Psalms of Degrees. The mountains that surrounded Jerusalem could cause the phrase to refer to songs about going up to Jerusalem, to all the 3 required festivals, the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles, those required feasts. It could be, and some believe that maybe the pilgrims going toward those feasts sang those psalms or songs, if you will, as they journeyed upward. It also could refer to the rising melody of the songs. Another possibility is the going up the steps to the temple. Once it was built, there were 15 steps going up to the temple, and it's powerful. The Songs of Degrees begin at Psalms 120, and they go through Psalm 134. The Songs of Degrees of David was Psalms 122, 24, 124, Psalm 131, and Psalm 133. A Song of Degree of Solomon's was Psalm 127. There were songs that were prayers of David, of Moses, and of the afflicted. The prayer of David could be found in Psalm 17, Psalm 86, and Psalms 142. Just to give you an example, when it's literally said that this is a prayer. Prayer of Moses, Psalm 90, so powerful. There's also Psalm 98. A psalm of praise is definitely Psalm 100. There's a specific psalm that's to bring to remembrance, Psalm 70. Another one to teach, Psalm 60. There are a lot of musical or unknown terms found in the superscriptions that we really don't really know. The word shair, or shi'er, it's a song that appears in 31 superscriptions and is translated song in each one of those appearances. The mizmor, it's instrumental music, and by implication, it's a poem set to music or notes. And it's translated in Psalm in each of its 58 appearances in the superscriptions where it is listed. There are Tefillah, which psalms of intercession and supplication, psalms that were turned into hymns. And this word Tefillah appears in 5 superscriptions, and it's translated prayer in each one. Psalm 17, 86, 90, 102, and 142. The Tehillah is a laudation, a praise. It's a hymn that appears in 2 superscriptions, Psalm 65, Psalms 145. The Tudah, it means adoration, translated praise, and it's found in the superscription of Psalm 100. A Shagan, it's a musical notation or a rhapsody, that's Psalm 7. Neganah, from the root word, it's a common name for a stringed instrument, and it literally means to touch or to strike on a chord or a key. That's amazing. The Ne'iloth is a wind instrument, perhaps a flute or some type of flute type instrument. The Sheminith, it's a musical term, and it's a stringed instrument, perhaps a stringed instrument with 8 strings, or the whole 8 octaves. The Gittith is a lyre or harp type instruments used with instruction in the superscription in Psalm 8, Psalm 81, and Psalm 84. There were some psalms that Alamoth is a soprano or female voice. That's in Psalms 53 and Psalm 88. Different songs had different instructions or things to specifically think about. One word that's used a lot in Psalms is the word Selah, and it literally means a pause. And sometimes it meant pause in the music and with the instruction to stop and think about this. So there are a lot of things within the psalm that it says Selah, and it literally means a pause or to stop, consider, think. And there were psalms known as the orphan psalms, psalms that had no superscriptions, 34 of them that did not have these general instructions or a tie to authorship or event or time and place. And they're known and designated as orphan psalms. And we'll talk more about these psalms in lesson 4. But there is a list here, and we may wait till lesson 4 to put this list in the description box for the orphan psalms. There's also acrostic psalms. Now these psalms it's a literary device used in some parts even of the Old Testament, not just in the book of Psalms, but it literally, each verse or a section of verses, specifically in Psalm 119, there's a designation of every 8 verses. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 verses that are designated under the name of the Hebrew alphabet. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet and their names. And it begins with Aleph, and it begins 8 verses, and then you have a pause and a break, and you have another 8 verses, and you go through the whole Hebrew alphabet, and it's listed, these verses are listed, and it corresponds to the Hebrew letter in the alphabet. Very, very serious study. Now, it's interesting to note that Psalms 119 has 176 verses, and I love this. I absolutely love this. 176 verses, and all of those verses, except for one, there is a designation to 10 specific words found in Psalms 119 that deals with the that deals with the Hebrew words that mean the word in some form or connotation. For example, you have the words of the actual word. You have the law. You have covenant. You have commandments. You have statutes and judgments and precepts and ordinances and the covenants and all words that really, when you're studying the Bible, have a tie to the Word of God. Now you think about that, every word. For example, one verse, Psalms 119 says, "Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee." David also said, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." And so for 175 of the 176 verses found in Psalms 119, there is a direct tie with a Hebrew word that is translated in some form or another as the Word. It's very powerful, very interesting. And this acrostic Psalms has that in it. That's unique to that. But the acrostic Psalms always is tied to the literary in Hebrew. Psalms 34 has 22 verses. So the first word of each verse begins with a Hebrew letter of the alphabet in order. Like beginning what we in alphabetical order, but it's the Hebrew alphabet, correct? All right, and then there's less regular acrostic psalms really that's missing one or more letters, but they're real close. And some things could have been lost in translation. There's Psalms 25, Psalms 37, Psalms 111, 112, and Psalms 145. Psalm 9, 1 through 10, and verse 18. Parts of these poems are acrostic or out in alphabetic order, so to speak, in the Hebrew. And in the Septuagint, which is the oldest Greek translation of the Old Testament, they are actually one poem. Psalms 19, 1 through 10, and 18. It's all one poem. So another example of acrostic psalms, really poems, not necessarily psalms, but poems outside of the book of Psalms is one Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 21. Begins with a Hebrew letter in alphabetical order. Now, if you remember, in doing any study in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 31, beginning with verse 10 through 21, speaks of the virtuous woman. So that's very powerful, very powerful. The book of Lamentations in chapters 1, 2, and 4, each contain acrostic of 20 verses with one verse to each Hebrew letter. It's not always in alphabetical order, but it's contained within those Lamentations. Very powerful stuff. And also in Lamentations chapter 3, it has 3 verses for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Very powerful stuff. So pay attention to the superscriptions, and we'll be reminding you of some of these things as we go throughout our study of the book of Psalms. You say, well, why do I need to know that? It's fascinating history, and it's interesting to note. And when we get to especially the Psalms that contain superscriptions about David, and information that says this is a Psalm of David when he was fleeing from Saul. This is a Psalm of David when God had delivered him out of the hand of all of his enemies and out of the hand of Saul. One specific thing said this is a Psalm of David when he ran into Doeg the Edomite at the tabernacle. So, I mean, there was when he was first fleeing from Saul. It's notable. The historic content and context of these passages are amazing. One psalm that I can think of is when Psalm 51, when David was praying for forgiveness with his sins that were surrounding Bathsheba and Uriah the Hittite. Just fascinating. So it's for our teaching, it's for learning, and that's some of what Paul said when he said, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, making melody in your heart unto the Lord, but also as teaching and instructing one another. Because the examples that come to us, the things that we learn in the book of Psalms, the prayers that come forth, the intercessions that come forth, the supplications that are manifested within the book of Psalms, and we find out the specific things that are happening, why it was written, why the psalmist, whoever it would be, David or others, poured out their complaint or poured out their praise, poured out their heart in worship to God, who they were either seeking for deliverance, asking for mercy, are giving God praise for these things. Very powerful stuff. So we begin our journey further into the book of Psalms. Now remember, the acrostic poems, each section of a word, it begins with the succeeding letter of the alphabet. I mean, it descends like we would go from A to Z. There's 26 letters in our alphabet, English alphabet. There's 22 in the Hebrew alphabet. It's fascinating to learn them, and if you want a glimpse into what they are, look at the book of the Psalm 119 in the book of Psalms, and before in the division of each 8 verses, after before the 9th verse begins, and so on in the every eight verses, you will be given the name of a Hebrew letter, and very fascinating study. Maybe you might feel inspired to learn the names of the the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. That's one reason to do it, is so you could better understand those. And of course, remember, there are many psalms that have superscriptions. There is a lot of psalms, and not all of them have a superscription. 116 of them have the superscription, so that is a lot of information. There's, of course, 150 psalms altogether in the book of Psalms. So 116 of them have those superscriptions. Now some of them are dedicated to the chief musician. Some of them say that this is a psalm of David, or this is a psalm of degrees, or this is to the chief musician. Remember, there's 55 of them. So a lot of information to learn and to memorize, and I look forward to sharing more of what we want to discover from the book of Psalms, and keep these superscriptions in mind when you are reading in the reading assignments for the book of Psalm, and you run across a superscription. Make note of it, and make note that, is this for information for a stringed instrument? Is this information for a harp? Is this information for a flute type information? It's a stringed instrument. Is this a prayer? Is this a direct just praise? Is this an intercession? Is it a supplication? Fascinating stuff. Enjoy your study in the book of Psalms. Again, I'm Dr. Karen Carr. I hope you have a wonderful day, and join us again soon for our next lesson in the book of Psalms. Thank you.